Welcome back, everybody. Today we've got a good buddy of mine, Detective Steve Borst from Kennebunk, Maine, Mo and myself. And Steve, I'm excited to have you here, brother. How you doing this morning?
Good. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Mo, you awake over there?
I'm ready. This is going to be a good one. I'm excited.
Damn right. So I'll kind of put the cart before the horse, but Steve had one of his many big cases, but it was heavily involved international warrants and bank fraud and foreign nationals and all this other stuff. But before we get to that, I just want to get a little feel for your upbringing, your background, like kind of how did you become Detective Steve Borst?
Kind of maybe a little bit different than most. I was born and raised in Massachusetts, about 30 minutes north of Boston, and kind of did the whole high school thing. Kind of was always interested in law enforcement. During high school, kind of really made the decision that that's the way that I wanted to go. I got into the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, and during my junior year, we had to do I think they called it a practicum, but it was like an internship.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go out and find so many hours in the field that you wanted to get into. So I did an internship with my local police department down in Massachusetts. And I would say after the first ride along, I was hooked. I knew that I made the right choice. I think it's something that I've always wanted to do. I tell everybody the story about when my grandmother was minding me when I was 3-4 years old. My grandfather used to moonlight on overnight security to make some extra money. And he used to have this security hat. And she used to catch me wearing the hat all around the house and stuff like that. So I was always kind of been fascinated with police work and stuff like that. And then go through high school, get into college, junior year of college, have to do this internship. And you're riding along with the cops. You're seeing what it's like on a day-to-day basis. And I knew I was hooked. In junior year of college, there was me and 2 other guys in a class, CJ class. And our instructor was a detective for a police department in New Hampshire, and super nice guy, super approachable, kind of would do anything for you. And the 3 of us approached him and said, if you were young guys, how would you want to break into law enforcement? And he gave us the advice that we all took, which was start in Massachusetts and work your way all the way up through New Hampshire and into Maine and all these coastal communities that hire reserve officers for the summer months when things get crazy busy with tourists. And that would be my suggestion. So the 3 of us did just that. We went on a ride one day. We dropped our resumes off to every police department that hired summer cops. And that was 1991. And the 3 of us got on at a small PD in Maine, York Beach, for the summer, where it was mostly back then was supplementing the full-timers, writing parking tickets, kind of community policing, but very different than it is today. No bicycles, no summer, no shorts, no polo shirts. You were walking around in a wool uniform with a hat and a ticket book.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the best thing ever. I knew right away this is what I wanted to do. So I went back in 92. I finished up my bachelor's, and it was very different back then. Trying to get on in law enforcement in Massachusetts because they had civil service and things like that. It was very, very different. So, and if you didn't have any political connections for people to kind of maybe fast track you through the process, it was very, very difficult. So I said, well, I got my foot in the door in Maine. I might as well stay there. I've already made some connections. So I switched over to a department that would let their reserves give them a little bit more leeway, a little bit more experience where they could actually drive a cruiser, things like that. So I did that for a couple of years as a reserve officer. In 1995, I got on full time, went to the academy, did all that.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you this. Because they've changed the academy. How long was the academy back then, I guess?
Well, I'll take you one step further. To be a reserve officer in Maine back then, it was 100 hours. So it was Monday through Saturday for 2 weeks, 50 hours each week. Range time, academics, things like that. And then you got sworn in as a reserve. And I can remember getting sworn in and working the very next day thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. You know what I mean? Now, fast forward to answer your question about the academy. Now, when I went through in 95, the academy was 12 weeks. They were trying satellite programs because like you've talked in other episodes, it's a little different for Mo to try to process this, but Maine's a pretty big state. And we had one academy. Back then it was in Waterville. So you could have guys from Aroostook County that had to drive 3 or 4 hours to go to the academy all week and then drive 3 or 4 hours to go home. So they tried doing some satellite academies. They did some in Portland, South Portland. I went to a satellite academy. It was 12 weeks. 480 hours. Nowadays, if people getting on the job. It's 18 weeks. It's at a different academy. It's in Vassalboro. I think you've probably been there, but the curriculum is much more, a lot more around mental health and things like that. But yeah, so in Maine, it's 18 weeks. It's a live-in academy now. Yeah, so I went to the academy. I think I kind of thrived in that environment. I was elected class president by my peers, which to me was kind of a big thing. Went back to the PD and started working in a full-time patrol slot on midnights. I did like 5 years-ish in patrol. Then I got promoted up to detectives a few years there, which the big thing there was I got to learn. I was always interested in doing drug work. And when I was in high school, I was thinking that maybe I wanted to go to federal DEA. But I think you know me well enough that I kind of I didn't want the Fed life because I felt like people who didn't know me had a very big hand in my life and where it was going to be, how it was going to be. Like, so I didn't want somebody that didn't know me. I get out of the DEA academy and they say, "Oh, guess what? You're going to Albuquerque, or you're going to Detroit, or you're going." I had no desire to go there, so I scrapped the federal program only because I didn't want to. I wanted to have more of a say in where I was going to live and grow up and hopefully get married, buy a house, and live my life.
Well, Steve, you and Mo have some similarities there. Mo, just because what you're saying is almost identical to some conversations I've had with Mo. But Mo, one, did you have a question? And two, could you piggyback on that?
Oh, yeah. Well, going back, I was very interested when he said he had a summer job as a cop. Most of us did summer jobs at like McDonald's or something.
Yeah.
Doing a summer job as a cop. So that's pretty funny. But when he was talking about being a reserve, you got sworn in and then you were working the very next day. So no field training, no nothing?
Nope. You go do like back then, the way it would normally work is you'd work either a day shift or a night shift. And if you were lucky and a full timer liked you enough, maybe at the end of your shift, he would let you do a ride along with him for free.
No.
Yep. Oh, sure. Yep. Same thing. Arrest powers, all that. It's a lot different nowadays where we went through 2 weeks back to back and you were done and you were blessed by the state to go work. And nowadays there are 3 phases, I think. So the kids have to do, or the new applicants have to do X number of hours online. Then they have to do X number of hours, like I think in person. Then they have to do X number of hours. They have to get hired or be supervised by a full-time law enforcement officer. So there are 3 phases. So it's much more stringent nowadays than it used to be.
Nice.
Yeah. The last thing is when he was talking about the parallel, that's exactly why I didn't want to become a Fed, because I was like, sounds really interesting, but I don't want somebody telling me where I'm going to be living for the next X amount of years. So I completely get that. And then I was super interested because when you said you got hooked as a ride along, that's exactly what hooked me in becoming a law enforcement officer also. So lots of parallel.
Yep, for sure. So detectives was probably like a really good jump off point for me because it was investigations, which has always been something that I've been interested in, kind of like solving the puzzle. I think that's kind of a big part of who I am, kind of trying to figure it out. So when I was in detectives back then, you would be a general detective. So you would run, cases that were crimes against persons, property crimes, drug crimes. You would do pre-employment background investigations. You had a little bit of everything. But the part that interested me the most was drug investigations. And, they had a task force here in the county, and I got to be on a pretty good, basis with those guys. And when they would come into town to do buys or surveillance or whatever, they would always tap me to tag along. And I got to learn from those guys, see how they were running drug investigations, how complex they could be. And that really kind of piqued my interest in 2006. Actually, there's one. I was in patrol, then I went to detectives, and I got promoted. I went back to the road as a corporal, and then I got the nod in 2006 to actually go to the drug task force, which, like, to me, that was going to be the best thing because it would be doing the drug work, it would be living where I wanted to live, and it was like the best of both worlds. So I did 3 years as an agent in York County, which, for people who aren't familiar, is the southernmost county in the state of Maine. It borders the state of New Hampshire. So I did 3 years as an agent and then got the opportunity. I was promoted up to be the supervisor for the unit in the county, another 3 years there. It was, a lot of work. They could have, Tyler, this, working out of Troop A for the state police. You could have 3 times the amount of agents working drug cases in this county, and they would all be busy.
For sure.
So, you never have enough people.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, Mo, to give you an idea, I'm not exactly sure how many people live in this county, but it's the second most populated county in the whole state of Maine. And there were times where we had 3 agents and a supervisor to run the whole county.
Gee.
With 95 running through it, and plus all the
Yep.
back roads, and the back roads off like River Road back over,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that connect.
So you could be at the beach where you have a population like where I work. Our year-round population is about 14,000-ish. Then in the summer, that 14 is now 50,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this huge influx of people on this tourist season, but they didn't up our personnel at all. We were still expected to run these cases,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was a pretty big area. It was definitely the highlight of my career. I learned a lot of complex investigations, which was kind of, like going back to that, I want to be the guy that solves the puzzle, kind of puts things together. I would have never had any experience or the opportunity to do like wiretaps and federal prosecutions and things like that as a local cop. So going to the task force was huge.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure, of course.
Obviously, in Florida, we have a huge tourist population, and for us, tourist increases. I was on our drug undercover portion as well, and the drug situation just exponentially grows because people come here with that Vegas mentality of, I'm on vacation, so I'm gonna do everything. In Maine, are you getting similar styled situations where not only are you talking about the population exploding, but the amount of cases are almost quadrupling because of all these people in the area?
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that's unique here in Maine, as Tyler will attest to, is the drugs that come into Maine are almost always flowing from south to north. So if you, and our source cities back then were Lawrence, Lowell, Brockton, Worcester, Massachusetts. So a quick 2-hour drive, a 2.5-hour drive. And if a crack rock down there was $20, that same crack rock after a 2.5-hour drive is now worth, $75 or $100.
Oh.
So they were making money hand over fist. And there were many times where we would see the bad guys come up from out of state, whether it's Massachusetts, Connecticut, like Bridgeport was a very big hub for us back then. They would come up with coke and they would go back with guns. Because in Maine, like some other states, we don't register guns here. You can, I can meet you on the corner of Walk and Don't Walk, and you can sell me a Glock, and that's the end of it. There's no paperwork. There's no nothing. Yeah. That's totally legal.
What is this?
So the ATF did a study, and the percentage was crazy about how many guns that originate in Maine are used in crimes in Massachusetts, and the number was staggering. But there was definitely a lot of guns for drugs cases back then.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah, and Mo, I think I've said it once or twice, but I was a deputy for 6 years almost, and I dealt with a lot of cocaine, crack, pills, things like that. And then I go to Maine. And that's the first time I came across one. When I say large quantities, it was like a baggie, like a sandwich bag of heroin, fentanyl. And then the first time I've ever in my career at that point seen black tar heroin. So, Steve, just, since we're kind of on that topic, what is it still kind of that way, or is it just kind of cross all boundaries now? There's everything. I know meth is kind of everywhere, but just, the more notable drugs, I guess.
Yeah, no, great question. I think coke, crack, and heroin have always had its place here. Around 2007, 8, 9 in there, we had a huge explosion of oxycodone. I personally worked cases in Maine where people were running down to Florida to go to these pill doctors, and they would just come back up with thousands of these pills, and they were pumping. I mean, I don't know how much the price is down in Florida, but in Maine, it's like roughly $1 a milligram. So back then, the hot thing that we wanted to buy was Oxy 80s. So for every tab that you were buying, it was $80. We did a case where we got introduced actually to a source here in Maine who was originally from Florida, and we started buying direct from his guy in Florida, where he would ship, a couple hundred pills at a time through FedEx to us. So the pills and the Oxy back, in the late 2000s, early 2010, 11, that was huge. Amphetamine back then, think about it like this, Tyler, you'll agree. In Maine, everything goes from west to east, where they might have had an explosion of methamphetamine in California and Arizona 15 years ago. Well, now it's in Maine. So everything kind of works its way west to east. So methamphetamine now, you talk to the guys on the task force now, and they're dealing with it a ton. They're dealing with people that are making it here, whether it's one pot or, they're trying their hand at it so they don't have to make the run out of state to get it. But methamphetamine is huge right now.
Really?
For me, like personally, to answer your question, when I was doing UC stuff, it was coke, crack, heroin. I'm a little too big of a guy. I'm not quite as big as Tyler, but I'm a little too big of a guy to be buying heroin. Have I done it? Yes, but they kind of look at you a little funny when you're on the street trying to buy heroin.
Yeah, fair enough.
Oxy, stuff like that. That was big then. Today, it's fentanyl and methamphetamine, and then you still have coke or crack.
Yeah,
as a solid, backup plan.
Mo, go ahead.
No, I was just listening because, like you said, I'm listening to him and how they're doing things. There's some similarities, but like you said, a lot of the moving is very different. So super interesting with that kind of thing. And I've been to Maine as a tourist, didn't really pay attention to the fact that you guys do have an influx of tourism in the certain months, and I didn't think about that it being so big that it would explode the population like that. So
yeah,
incredible.
It's not uncommon to have triple your population in 3 or 4 months.
So Mo, Maine is Canada's Florida. So in the summertime, you get a lot of pasty white Canadians in Speedos, but then you also get an influx of New Yorkers and Massachusetts dudes. So that 95 corridor is a real thing. You get this weird influx. And then on top of that, and Steve, help me with this, but you also get a lot of bikers. And again, not necessarily, they're not always the criminal element bikers, but people like to ride their motorcycles in Maine. It's a whole thing. And so you'll have, there's several biker bars that are actually like family restaurant. I don't know. I don't know that I bring my family there, but you'll have 400 or 500 bikes out front, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a biker gang bar or anything like that, but you just get this weird hodgepodge of people, especially in the summer.
Yeah, for sure.
And with it brings its own types of crime. But anyway, so Steve, what are you doing now? I guess is because I want to lead up to this Romanian case.
Sure. So when I left the task force in 2012, you go back to your sponsoring agency, and I quickly realized that it was not the place that I had left 6 years prior, and it was time for a change. So I switched departments in 2013. I came here to Kennebunk, probably one of the best things I ever did. It sucked a little bit because I had to start over, meaning back to midnights, reduction in pay, reduction in seniority, reduction in vacation. But for me, all that was worth it because, like Tyler, you and I have talked a million times about work, home life balance.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be happy in this job. I don't care if you're up in Florida, Maine, Texas, where you got to be happy, right? Because there's too many things in this job that we see and do that can drag you down. And I knew that I needed to be happy, and I needed a change of environment. So I came here. Chief has been always super, accommodating. If you have a certain career path that you want to go down, certain trainings that you want to get into, specialties, things like that, he loves that stuff. He loves the guys and the girls who want to do more. So if you want to be an accident reconstructionist, awesome. You want to be a drug recognition expert, perfect. Be on a task force and he can swing it, he'll do it. So to answer your question, Tyler, when I came here, I went back to the drug unit for 1 year as kind of like a part-timer. They had a program called the resident agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working X number of days a week here at the PD and X number of days a week at the task force. But that got to be a little complicated and a little harder than I thought it was going to be. Switched me out. I came back to the PD. They sent somebody else to the task force, which by design, I think you would agree. They were usually the average guy that was going, or the girl that was going to the task force was there usually for like 2 to 3 years. I was kind of an anomaly because I was there for 6 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was definitely the highlight. So I come back to the PD. I do some time back on the road, get promoted back, and now I'm back here at what I call home in criminal investigation division. But again, we don't have specialized groups. Like maybe Portland PD might have a crimes against people section in their CID or crimes against persons. Or here we do it all, just like before. Could be pre-employment backgrounds, could be drug cases, sex cases, property crimes, things like that. So you get a little bit of everything. But I wanted something more. Being so close to the president's summer home helped me forge a relationship with you guys when you were on Secret Service. Solid group of guys, as you know, Tyler, back then. The three amigos, that was a hard team to beat. And having that relationship where, hey, we're going to have a movement today with the former president, and we need to do this, that, and the other thing. Who would be a good guy to help? Introductions or like with other PDs. I just celebrated 30 years last month. So I know some people. So if you needed something, for your job, I always like that networking. And then you guys asked me, said, hey, Boston Division, New England Field Division doesn't have a cyber fraud task force, and we want to get one going, and we'd like you to be on it. I think it was a huge. I was flattered that you guys would pick me for that, and it was something new. It was a new challenge. Get sworn in as a task force officer, TFO, for a newly created task force here, run by the Secret Service, was something that nobody else had the opportunity to do. So I jumped on.
Yeah, Mo, a couple things. I used to, I might be downplaying because Matt, who is another buddy of ours, he's probably the king of Maine. But I used to say, I felt like the mayor of Maine only because I could call somebody anywhere. And I used to always say that Steve if I was the mayor, he was the governor because he knows, Maine, it doesn't matter what state almost. He'd be like, where are you at? Oh, Oklahoma? Yeah, I know a guy. That, when we were trying to create some form of a task force, let me back it up a little bit. I'm sorry, Steve, I apologize because I feel like I got to explain. And Mo, if I start rambling, just chop me. So Secret Service, when you're in phase 1, they want you to work financial crimes cases and threats against the president, those kind of cases. Well, they want you to work those cases while also doing protection and traveling around and standing post and, doing security ops plans and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to continue to work cases. I recall a time when I was standing post and I was trying to coordinate a takedown in another state while I'm standing post in Mar-a-Lago. And I'm trying to on post, trying to coordinate with other agencies to do it. And I couldn't be there because protection is king. And so we were like, we need help so that the cases could continue. And so when we finally got somebody to listen, and I can't say that it was my baby because it was me, Matt, and Nate, but more Matt, like I said, would probably be the king of Maine. He knows fucking everybody. And he's like, well, boom, these 3 names. And it was Steve was one. And you know what? I don't want to mention the other ones yet because I might, if we ever have them on. But Steve, you know who they are.
Yep.
But basically, it covered the entire state of Maine. And so it was just a quick couple phone calls. And it was like, boom, they were ready to go. And while we were all there, we were crushing it, Mo. Like fucking crushing it. But in typical fashion, Matt leaves, I leaves. And by that, we were forced out. And then you have a new group that comes in and there's nothing wrong, but it takes time to build those relationships. It's one of my biggest things with task force stuff. It takes a long time to develop and foster relationships, especially with other cops, because they got to trust you. They got to believe you that if you say you're going to do something, fucking do it.
Yeah.
So it gets a little frustrating, but no, yeah, it was definitely during that time period. It was probably some of the most fun I've ever had. And the thing is, and Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, but we had fun doing it. Like we were working, we were getting our shit done, but it didn't really feel like work because we were all just hanging out with each other.
Right. No, even after hours, right? If we would hook up and we'd talk strategy, like, hey,
yeah,
next time we hook up, we should go do this, this, and this. And, I was kind of doing like the street level localized investigations where you guys had access to different databases and different things and different levels through the Fed system. And it worked out really, really well. It just did. And it was something that I didn't necessarily think that I was going to like at first because it was financial. So I was thinking like a lot of math, which has never been my strong point, but it's really, really good. And the sad thing is, like Tyler said, is the 3 guys who got it off the ground, actually the 4 guys, if you include Brett.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I can't forget Brett. He was the boss that said, yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But so when you take the 4 people who started a program or started something from the ground up, and then they all leave for different reasons, like somebody retires and the other guys get reassigned, or one guy moves overseas. Now you're going to get those positions backfilled and people brought up to speed, and it kind of, it's a different environment today, but I'm still very grateful to be there. So.
No, absolutely. No, did you have something?
No, I was, when he was talking, he ended up answering my question about some of the stuff, but his career, like the way it has gone, super interesting. And I feel like it's where he was placed, where he was placed. It was just interesting as to how it led him to his next step and the next step and the next step. So he answered it.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, kind of fortunately, but unfortunately for me, Tyler, since you left Maine, Mo was talking about like being a good investigator, right? And then people seeing that and recognizing it and appreciating it. They say, hey, we want that guy on our team. And so that's how things went, right, to become the TFO with Secret Service. Yeah. Then the state police were starting a new program that wasn't in place, Tyler, when you were a trooper. It's called the Affiliate Investigator Program.
Okay.
And so kind of sort of the same lines where the guys who are on the task force need help because they're getting crushed. Like the stats, like you're digging yourself out of holes every single day. So my boss came to me one day here at the PD and said, "Hey, what do you know about this affiliate investigator program? It's for the ICAC, or Internet Crimes Against Children." And I said, "Well, I know that it's run by the Computer Crimes Unit of the State Police up in Augusta, and they're getting crushed and they need some help." And he said, "Okay, you're the guy." I wasn't asked to do it. I was told I was going to do it. I had to go back to the academy for a couple of days and some training. But they added another 40 investigators statewide to help with child pornography and exploitation cases.
Yeah.
So in addition, I had the drug task force for a while. I had cyber fraud task force currently, and Internet Crimes Against Children ICAC task force.
Steve, let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
Because it's something that sounds like it's something we both kind of gotten to a point in our career, law enforcement career, but used to love running and gunning, burglars, robbers, sex crime stuff, catching those guys. Like that was kind of like, this is why I became a cop. And then I transitioned into the Secret Service where it was financial crimes. And I'm like, God, and spreadsheets and bank docs and all this stuff like that. And I was like, good Lord. And then you go to like a grand jury and you're trying to talk about this bank fraud or this, fraud scheme. Half of them are falling asleep. They're bored out of their fucking minds.
It's true.
But for me, it's like I enjoyed it almost more because it was like, it's very difficult to identify who the actual to catch these dudes, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, it's like I enjoyed it more, even though it might not be, I hate to call those other things sexy, but it's not as appealing. They don't, a lot of prosecutors and grand jurors are just like, yeah, they just kind of, but for me, it's more fun. Like you're catching these dudes.
And that's like, for me, right? That's the big part of it is like, if you asked me in the beginning, why do you want to be a cop? It was, to put the bad guys in jail and to protect the people who couldn't protect themselves.
Yeah.
And then, and obviously, and I still, at 30 years, I still get a charge when you can help a victim of a crime or of a witness or, whatever. You can go a little above and beyond and help those people make a big difference. I still get something out of that, which is, I think, the reason why I'm still doing it. But as far as like, yeah, if you said, "Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm a detective and I work on a gun task force." That's pretty sexy. But, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm a detective, but I'm also on a task force for financial crimes." Like, that's not so sexy, right?
Yeah. Are you an accountant? Like, what are we talking about?
Right. But for me, I still get a charge out of it.
Yeah.
And you had asked about this Romanian organized crime case. So we can jump into that if you want. But that's like a very good example of trying to figure it out. And who are these people? And if somebody said, "You mean Kennebunk, Maine had Romanian organized crime come through town?" Most people would say, "No way," right? This is like, they live in this idyllic utopia of this coastal seaside community that is very well to do. And it's like vacation land. Everybody wants to come here.
Mm-hmm.
The criminals want to come here too, right? They want to exploit. They want to get their fair share or more than their fair share. And then move on.
Yeah, let me set it up a little bit because I do want to jump into it, and then Mo, if you have any questions, because it's a very cool case. Most people, and I could tell you this because on the Secret Service, people would come to Maine for campaign stuff, whatever. They're thinking it's either a vacation spot, cabins and bears, what does 200 people live up there in the whole state? Like they don't have really a solid idea of what Maine is. And then, but when I was working on the Fed side, we would catch guys who were coming up there to do fraud, to commit fraud and, basically cash and stolen checks and stuff like that. And we would arrest them, and on their phones, they will be searching the statutes in Maine for financial crimes. And on the state side, most financial crimes, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, are all misdemeanors. Like they're not heavily investigated.
Yeah, you don't get a big bang for your buck.
You know what I mean? So most of those cases have to go federal. While on the Fed side, you can only take so many cases. So if there's 1,000 arrests, maybe 10 of those might go federal. So a lot of the people in the bigger cities would come up to Maine to commit those fraud, that crime, and then go back into their states.
A lot of transient crime, Tyler.
Oh yeah.
Like Mo asked earlier about everybody coming to Maine in the summer.
Yeah.
For that vacation land vibe. Well, yeah, but so don't the criminals, right? They come up here, whether you're slinging dope from Boston, you're going to come up here and quadruple your money. Or you can just come up to Maine, like we saw with that Romanian case, and just do a quick hit and get out of this, geographic area and move on to the next one before you know what hit.
And one more thing. So I didn't know this either until I got to know some of the business owners up there. In the summertime, a lot of the business owners, hotels, restaurants, stuff like that, they will go out and they'll seek a work permits for the summertime because there's not enough workers for the influx of people that come in. So you get a lot of people from South America, Jamaica, Eastern Europe, and
Yep.
they come in just to work. And to be clear, 99% are there to work, do their thing, and then go back home because they're there to make money. But every year you get this little 1%, and I think this will be a good tie-in. And I don't know if this was the case with the Romanian dude. You know, we basically bring them in to work, but while they're here, they're committing crime.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that was the Romanian case, but certainly, I mean, I think you were still up here in Portland, Tyler. I had a Jamaican J1 visa worker work in the restaurants, and he was essentially a money mule for crypto cases. So yes, because you're right. Like if you promise them easy money, like, well, that's why they're here. They want to make that money.
Yeah, for sure.
So if they can make it by working 18 hours a day, good. If they can make it by working 18 hours a day and 2 hours being a money mule for somebody with crypto or something, they're going to do that too.
Even better.
Fair enough. All right, go ahead, Steve. I've read up on it. I'm interested in it. You know, I've talked about it, but just lay it out. I love it.
Yeah. So just like Tyler was saying, this organized crime from Romania, and I'll tell you how it started. It's in June, right? So summertime. It's like 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. This dude walks up to an ATM here in town wearing the old COVID mask and baseball hat and whatever, and starts ripping cash out of people's accounts with stolen PII. So obviously we just start with surveillance pictures. We're like, who the hell are these dudes and why are they here in the middle of the night? And come to find out they started here in Kennebunk, but they went up a couple counties and they were doing the same thing. And so once me and another agency in Southern Maine realized that we were all looking at the same people, we kind of took the ball and ran with it. And what it was is we realized, well, it's kind of it's like a long drawn out story, but we knew that these guys were driving around in the middle of the night, hitting up ATMs and stealing people's money out of their bank accounts. What we didn't know was who they were, where they're from. Based on the way they were dressed and their MO, we kind of figured they're definitely not from here. They're from away, probably based on their clothing, like Eastern European, maybe. So we started working on that. We get lucky where we got a license plate number off the vehicle, which came back to an independent person, California, which cracked open another huge case because it was a dirty peer-to-peer rental place. And so these dudes from Romania came into the country illegally through Arizona, arrested at the border, processed and released with a court date. It was 2 years later. So catch and release. They come back. Now they're here legally. Well, not legally. They're here after being booked by Customs and Border Protection. They go to California. They hook up with this other criminal and they get themselves a rental car. And they start across the country. And these guys that were like a street crew is what we learned. That's what they were dubbed, was a street crew. They're the ones that are actually doing the hand-to-hand dirty work at the ATMs. But then we also learned there was a whole logistics team behind them. Those teams were responsible for getting the rentals, hooking them up with Airbnbs in whatever geographic area they needed to go work. There was another one that would get them like fake documents, like fake passports and things like that. So it's kind of an involved crew. At one point they came up here and they started exploiting the financial system here in Maine, mostly, actually all, in our case was all credit unions, not big national banks. Once we figured out the vehicle, we did some background, some checking. We used different databases. We found out that the vehicle had been stopped by the police in Maryland 2 months prior. And when the dude was stopped driving the same rental car that we were looking at, he wasn't wearing his mask this time, but ironically, he was wearing the same tracksuit that he used on a bunch of our bags. So we said, oh, there's the guy. So we ID'd him. Then we did some checking. We realized that he came in when they were grabbed at the border. He came in with a group of people. So we had another name. Sure enough, that's the second dude that's with him when he's up here in Maine, hitting up all the banks. And we know then that they did a bunch of different areas across the United States. They were down south, like Alabama, Florida for a while. They had come up to Virginia, Maryland, New Hampshire, Maine. So I pitched the case as a TFO for Secret Service to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they agreed to prosecute federally once we ID'd who they were. They had split up after they exploited New England, and we learned that one of them flew back to Romania, and the other one continued back across the country back to back to California. And the funny thing is when he got back to California, he had to meet with his immigration agent who had his case, because remember, they came into the country illegally. And the immigration agent told him, you're going to have to wear a GPS monitor on your ankle. And at first he said he refused. He was not going to do it. But then they told him, well, then we're going to detain you until your immigration hearing. So he didn't like that. So he said, go ahead, put it on. So they we know the date that they installed the GPS on his ankle. And about a couple of weeks went by. And like you said, Tyler, like in this job, a huge part of it is networking,
Mhm.
information sharing, intel sharing. And I had seen a bulletin come out of Medford, Oregon, and looking to ID a guy who's doing a bunch of cash outs at ATMs over there. So clear on the other side of the country, I call Medford, Oregon PD and I say, that guy in your bulletin that you just put out, this is his name. So they worked with their local agencies over there that were affected, and they teamed up with HSI. So if you can imagine, like, get the picture of the United States in your head. On the East Coast, it was Kennebunk PD, Freeport PD, and Secret Service. And then on the West Coast, working the same crew was Medford, Oregon PD, and HSI. So once we realized that the case was much bigger, and it had this national cross-country theme to it, the guys in Oregon hit it up for OSA designation, which was authorized. So it opened it up for, federal prosecution on both coasts, Oregon, District of Oregon, District of Maine. And when the guy had his GPS tracker on, yes, he went into Oregon and started hitting banks there, but we later used that GPS data to show that he was at these banks over there during the same time frame that they were hit up, during skimming attacks. So it worked against him big time up there. He got to a point where I don't think he cared anymore, and he cut it off. So he was in the wind for it was 4 to 6 weeks. And, we'll take the luck in this business when we can get it. There was a bank cleaner in Nampa, Idaho, who was doing his job one night, and he noticed there was this dude standing out by the ATM, kind of acting a little squirrely. So he came outside, and the dude went across the street to another bank, to a different ATM.
So you were at the cleaner in Oregon?
Yep. So this dude was a bank cleaner in Oregon and was out doing his job like he would any other night. Noticed this dude was in the parking lot, kind of acting a little suspiciously and hanging around the ATM. So the cleaner went outside, and the dude went across the street to another bank and started hanging around that ATM. So the bank cleaner called the local police there in Nampa, Idaho, went over and ID'd him. And by that time, we had already put out federal arrest warrants for him. So he got locked up and extradited back to Oregon on our case. And then our U.S. Attorney's Office here worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oregon, and we did this thing called the global plea, where he didn't need to keep flying back and forth across the country. So he pled guilty to the cases in both districts while he was out in Oregon, and he was just sentenced to 54 months 60 months supervised release, and 137,000.
Copy that. Mo, did you have questions? I have a bunch of questions.
Here in the District of Maine.
Go ahead, Mo.
One of the things you said is
go ahead.
All credit unions. Was it because they were softer targets? What was their rationale behind going for the credit union?
Yes, great question, and you hit the nail on the head. We learned that they were hitting the mom and pop credit unions because in their minds they did not have the infrastructure or the safety protocols in place that a big national bank like a Chase or a Bank of America would have. They thought there would be a safety
we were talking about, because this sounded like this was an enormous operation.
Yeah, it was huge. So in the group that we know that we're here in Maine, 2 guys on the street team and at least 1 guy on the logistics teams that we identified. And so the logistics team was responsible for getting them the skimming equipment that they were using at the ATMs. How we know that they were setting up Airbnbs in the geographic area that they had to go hit, things like that. But, here in the District of Maine, there was a $137,000 loss. But if you were to add up the other districts that were affected by these guys, just this crew, just this cell was over $1 million. And through the peer-to-peer car rental company out in California, we learned that there was another cell or 2 cells that were doing skimming, but targeting EBT funds instead of just people's individual bank accounts.
What?
And those crews, I think it was over 20 million in loss.
So based on what you're saying, do you guys feel like you caught them all, or that there's a lack of that one?
Oh, no, definitely not. I mean, the one that we did catch in Idaho, who just pled guilty and was sentenced, essentially he said, yeah, you caught me. I'm not talking. I'm not cooperating. I'll take my medicine. And it's because it's part of organized crime. The other guy that we identified, and this was very interesting part for me as far as being a local investigator, we actually learned that he flew back to Romania. So we put out arrest warrants for them after grand jury, which is, par for the course. But then being with Secret Service, they have Tyler will tell you, they have a long arm, and they have attachés all over the place. So we teamed up with the attaché in Bucharest and confirmed that he was back over there in Romania, and actually had him arrested on our. Now this is where it gets kind of crazy and disappointing all at the same time. So here I am thinking that we have both the guys that we identified as far as being responsible in our cases. Everything is good. And they told us initially that the guy would be back stateside in 60 days. Well, that changed because somehow, some way, they figured out that this guy who was higher up on the organized crime chain of command had been convicted, I assume, in absentia. I guess they must have had a trial when he wasn't there, and they convicted him of attempted murder, and he owes 12 years over there in Romania. So they are not going to extradite him back here until he serves his 12 years over there.
He's in jail somewhere.
Well, you would think, right, Mo? the people in Romania let him go while his lawyer works out this 12-year plea thing. Yeah, it's crazy. All that work, right? And you get the guy, you lock him up, and you get him before a judge over in Romania, and people here in the United States are working to, extradite him back. That's why, and they let him go in the meantime.
Yeah, the justice system works differently in different countries. It works very differently.
Yeah. Well, he left.
Last question I had: the guy that you said was sentenced to 52 months or whatever, is he getting deported after? Since
Yep.
Okay, because I didn't hear you say that. And I was like, come on, man.
Yeah, that's my
understanding. Because he's going to do it again.
Yeah. He had prior history in other countries for doing this. Yeah. This is just a part of their plan. They just come in, they go to different parts of the country, and they attack our financial system. And I would love to know how they're getting the money back to Romania, because obviously that's where it has to go, whether it was Western Union or crypto or something, but obviously their proceeds of their crime here are going back to
that got him caught.
Yeah. If you can imagine a Romanian guy wearing head to toe tracksuit, matching top and bottom, Hugo Boss, when he got out of the car in the traffic stop in Maryland, I said, there's no way we could be this lucky. And we compared him to the 3 or 4 banks surveillance pictures, and he's wearing the same hat.
Well, Steve, our friend from around the way over in France, he's coming back. I think he liked the tracksuit idea. He's got a bunch of tracksuits as well. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was laughing with Maine when we were having our technical difficulties, because early on you said you knew they were from away. That's a very New England way of saying we know they weren't residents of Maine.
Yes.
They're from away.
That's correct. That's right. Transient crime. Yes. I don't know about how many people wear Tommy Hilfiger top to bottom or Hugo Boss top to bottom and weird brand sneakers and things like that. Yeah. They kind of just fix them up. It's not, Tyler, it's the same thing as if you're here in the summer months here in Maine and you walk down Old Orchard Beach, Kennebunk Beach, and you see what they wear for bathing suits.
Oh yeah,
it's entirely different.
No, it's very true. It's a lot of shiny flesh just walking around in dress. Very true.
Yes, exactly.
They're from away. Exactly. They're from away. So a couple questions. What's it like working on an international warrant? Because just a little background. I have a guy who's from Nigeria who I've left since then, but we were working on an international warrant for extradition for 4 years, and then I left. So I don't know if it ever happened or not, but it can be very slow and cumbersome.
Yes. I know it was very weird, right? Like as cops, Mo, I'm sure you probably do it the same process in Florida as we do up here in Maine. You work a criminal case, you develop probable cause, you want to get a warrant out there for somebody, and you swear it out in front of a judge in an affidavit. In this case, Tyler, to answer your question, it was very different. I had to do an affidavit about the criminal charges and why we believed that he had left the country and he was in Romania. But the United States attorney who was assigned to the case, she too had to do her own affidavit. Very similar format to ours, where your training and education and experience and outlining how she got folded into the mix. And then together we had to go to the federal judge and she signed it in front of us. But then I figured that's where it would stop. That's not the case. And I think where you probably hit your snag, Tyler, all that work that you just did has to go to Maine Justice in D.C. And it has to get reviewed down there. And that's when things really came to a grind. There's a lot of people that review it. And finally, I think it probably took 4 months-ish for them to finally say, yes, this is good to go. And
and I don't know how many, and again, I'm just pulling numbers out of my ass, but Maine, if there's 1,000 cases that go before the Fed system and 10 get plucked out, there's the same 1,000 that goes down to Maine Justice, which Maine Justice just meaning the main hub for the Department of Justice in D.C. Of that 1,000, maybe 2 if it's international. And it takes so long. That's when politics and administration stuff, and depending on who's in the administration and what the, bureaucracy is, that kind of dictates what it is they're willing to do or not do. So it's a fucking crapshoot. But so that's, once again though, Steve, that's why this one is still that's why this was incredibly impressive, because you were able to get all of this done How long from beginning to end was this case? That's very impressive.
Just under 2 years. But here's the other thing that a lot of people didn't know is I didn't work on this case full time. As a TFO, I'm only working for them part time.
Mm-hmm.
So this was in addition to all my other normal everyday caseload, sex crimes and burglaries and, pre-employment backgrounds or whatever else would come to you.
Oh, yeah. No,
Workflow.
I get it. And then you and I were talking before we started, and most of that time you were spent, it was basically you by yourself because, once again, the agents in the office were on protection and gone and doing other things. And, they need you to guard that stairwell or drive, Miss Lady around. I'm I'm being very serious. It's the number one priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but it's just wild. And
it is
funny.
Yeah, protection for sure.
The general public, I'm a cop, and this is still literally mind-blowing to me. And the general public literally has no idea.
No. And that's the thing. It goes both sides because I came from the world, but, your work, if you really like criminal casework, you're working hot and heavy on a case, you're doing good work, you're doing what you got to do. And then it's like, oh, Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so wants to go shopping or go antique, or, hey, it's campaign season, fucking wrap. Just shut it down. Just turn the lights off because you're gone anyway. And once again, this was the concept for TFO. But again, you're taking, Steve, let me back it up. You have to be very selective because you've got to be very independent and willing to just fuck it, figure it out, grind it out, feel confident you can make the calls and talk to the prosecutor and get shit done. But, you're gone and you're not even there to help in a lot of cases on the Secret Service side, which is a disservice because there are some excellent criminal investigators. Far superior to anything I've ever been able to achieve. And they'll take this individual who's got all this training and skill sets and, crushing, global cases and nationwide cases. And they're like, yeah, man, that's cool. We need you to guard the stairwell though. It's very important. You gotta get on this. We need you over here. And that's what'll happen. It's wild, man.
Yeah. I would think everything you just said is true, but I would say, as far as the Secret Service in this particular case, it was, hey, we know you're working this case. Let us know if you need a hand. But
yeah,
you're going to be tied up doing protection here, there, and everywhere, which I get, right? That's their job. That's job one. I get it. So a lot of the times it would be I did A, B, C, D, and E. I would write it up and I would send it to the office, and they on paper they assigned an agent, special agent to work with me as a TFO. But a lot of it was, hey, just so you know, while you were in, Texas, these are the 4 things that happened on this case. And then he would report it up to the rack, but all great guys. But I just feel bad that I think they want to get deeper in the weeds with cases, but they know that.
No, for sure. For sure. Mo, anything to round it out?
I was just going to say, I think that it's a really cool and unique experience that you guys kind of created in Maine. And it allows a lot of the locals, in this instance, to get some experience they probably would never get based on that. And it allows, if they're going to do that protection, this is the only way to fix it. So, otherwise, this guy who comes into Romania is going to come into Maine and just ravage and move through state to state with no avail. So I think it's the way that it has to be done. But super interesting story. Very, very cool. I find it interesting, too, because a lot of the stuff that you're saying, Steve, it parallels some of the things, again, that I did in my career. Because when I worked undercover, we had TFOs as well. And there were 2 of us that were assigned to Secret Service. So I was the secondary, not the primary, but a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, super interesting. We just never had a case like this. So thank you for sharing with us.
Love it. Hey, Steve, guys, hang on after we end this, if you guys are good. Because, Steve, I had a couple thoughts, but I want to talk about them offline.
Yeah.
Yep.
And?
Yeah, sure.